Hello and welcome to the Extremis Publishing Podcast. I'm Tom Christie, and it's a great pleasure to be joined today by Abertay University's Phillip Vaughan and Matthew Bett, who are going to be talking about a really exciting and fascinating new technological innovation that's cited in Dundee, the CoSTAR Realtime Lab, which is an absolutely fascinating new virtual studio which has enormous implications for film and TV, for computer gaming, for live performance, and many other applications besides. So thank you so much, Phil and Matt, for joining us today.
It's our pleasure. No problem. Glad to be here.
So what can you tell us about this project? Because it is a fantastic collaboration between industry and academia, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting one. So it's a UK government HRC funded 5-year project to kind of upskill infrastructure and skill sets of people in the mostly film and TV industry, but it goes beyond that. CoSTAR is actually part of a network. So the Realtime Lab is part of a bigger network which stretches across the UK. There's a base in London, which will be at Pinewood Studios when that opens up in 2026. There's Live Lab, which is in Wakefield in north of England. There's the Studio Ulster and Screen Lab in Belfast. And we are the Realtime Lab, dealing more with real-time applications and game engines that actually drive some of the virtual production work which we're looking into. And maybe Matt could talk a little bit about the studio setup that we have in place for this.
Yeah, so in Dundee, we have what I would describe as a medium-sized virtual production studio. So there's no suggestion we can make the next Marvel blockbuster there, but it's really a stage that's suited for car work, for advertisements, music videos, small projects, possibly some TV work. And that's the kind of the sort of the scope of the technology there. Even though it's smaller, we're very lucky to be working with some great partners that have given us access to the very, very high end of technology that's available. So even though it's small in size, it's not small in power. It has the same technological capabilities as the very best studios in the world, but just packaged up efficiently, I would say, into the studio space we have available. So we're just getting everything up to speed just now, but it's very exciting, and we really hope that this can be the sort of the nexus of our resurgence and interest in filming in the Dundee and Tayside and Angus area, getting some projects in, some things shot at the studio, and yeah, starting everything from there.
Yeah, I mean, I was amazed at the sheer scale of the studio when you kindly invited me along to have a look, because I think, in the public consciousness, particularly somebody my age, when you talk about virtual studios, you immediately think about BBC's The Adventure Game, you think about ITV's Nightmare, you think about all of those, painstaking chroma keying analog techniques that were used back then to make it happen. But this eliminates the need for all of that, doesn't it? I mean, it's an absolutely amazing innovation.
Yeah, I think they're really good kind of barometers of where that technology has come from, and especially with those interactive elements as part of those more kind of game type shows. I think it's really interesting because what we have the luxury of is that kind of real-time feedback, so you can actually see the environment you're in. The lighting will be matched to that. There's no post-production needed on any of the work that we do in the facility. And I actually am really keen to kind of experiment with the kind of more interactive elements of this rather than just a linear backdrop, which is mostly what it's used for at the moment. I think the real cutting edge research that can be done in this area is how we make that a bit more immersive and a bit more interactive with participants who are in that space or even remotely as well. I think it's got huge potential, which is relatively untapped at the moment. It's being used in the kind of way that you'd expect it to be used. And some of the work that's coming out is fantastic. It's all coming through the game engine, the Unreal Engine mostly. But I think we're looking just to go a bit beyond that.
Yeah, I think Nightmare and Adventure Game are high on Phil and I's list of inspirations, but something like that, sort of these experimental uses, like what can we do with this that isn't a kind of understood bread and butter application. So it's going to be really exciting to get some of the projects we've got planned to come in and really push this technology into ways that and uses that we've not seen yet, or we don't know if they're going to work. But the main thing is that we kind of grow the studio, grow our own knowledge and experience as we go through it. But yeah, there's going to be some fun things in place soon.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned the Unreal Engine, which I'm sure many people will associate with high-end video games. How is that used in application for film and TV? Because it's a really, fascinating application.
I suppose over the last 4 or 5 years, real-time game rendering technology has reached a stage where it's not photoreal. That word is banded around a lot. Where photorealistic isn't something that we can hope to achieve, but the word I would use is believable, and particularly believable in camera. So we haven't crossed that threshold where you can have something on screen or shot to a camera that looks like it could be a part of the real world. And that's kind of enabled all this transition into virtual production for the film industry, where we're not showing something on an Xbox at 60 frames a second. We're showing it on a very large screen for the purposes of it being on camera. So it's really the technology that's been the first one to the post of getting the visuals to the stage where they can actually be shown as part of a film, as part of the real world like this. So it's not necessarily to say that it'll always be Unreal Engine, but right now it is the industry standard for this sort of thing. And obviously, as a games university, we're very placed to take advantage of this because we have such experience, particularly with that specific piece of technology. So we're able to fit right in there and jump to the very bleeding edge of what's possible in that space as well.
I think that's what's really interesting, is the intersection of all these different industries, I suppose, and also skill sets. It's really only now, I would say, it's been possible to take an asset from a game engine, move it into a film environment or a TV environment or animation or interactive platform, and move the assets seamlessly across and have that kind of look and feel of consistency across the different formats. And that also ties into some of the animation work as well, encompassing motion capture and retargeting of animations onto different characters in real time, so that actors can interact with characters who might be it might be a science fiction setting, it might be a fantasy setting. They can actually see who they're acting against. You don't have to wait until they comp. They're not acting against a tennis ball or something similar. And I think really from the point of view of me and Matt both come from the games industry, and if you look back at the tracking of that, there was kind of quite a disparity between the content in a way. And I worked on plenty of licenses that were based on film and TV franchises over the years, but they were always seen as the second cousin of the main IP. And I think we're getting to the point now where we can actually kind of bridge the gap between film and TV work, high-end film and TV work, and games, and come up with something new that sits in the middle of that. And what that also means is that there's much more room for talent to maneuver between these two different camps, if you want. Really, our goal is to bring these two different camps together and kind of work, in a way that is much more kind of cost effective, I would say, and also sympathetic to each other.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned performance. I mean, this must be an enormous benefit to actors. I remember when the Star Wars prequel trilogy came out, you had actors like Terence Stamp, who obviously went on record saying how challenging he found it to talk to people who weren't there in front of a green screen. And you could, I suppose, contrast that with people like Ian McDermott, who made his start at Dundee Rep, saying that actually he was quite at home acting in front of a curtain because of all his theatre experience. But now, of course, that's no longer an issue. The actor's right there in the thick of it. He or she can see the background, the effects are all being rendered in real time. I mean, it must be an enormous benefit.
Yeah, we're very lucky in Dundee, especially the size of the city. We've got really great connections with the Rep Theatre, which you mentioned, Scottish Dance Theatre, which is based there as well. And beyond that, in Glasgow, there's the Conservatoire. We've come and done some work with us on the mocap side. And we're looking to push even further out and work with more performers and people who maybe not had any experience on these type of sound stages, because that's actually the majority of people who haven't actually had any type of acting experience. It's very high end at the moment, and part of the project is to somewhat democratize that and make it accessible for people, you know, who maybe wouldn't normally have that opportunity. So we're really reaching out and almost putting the call out, you know, come in, have a look at what we're doing. You know, we're going to be doing some demo days quite soon, which we'll share the dates with you later on in the year, and we want to showcase kind of what the potential is of the spaces, and especially for performers, because, you know, a lot of the time you're only as good as the performance you put into that space.
Yeah, because I think more and more now we're hearing about the intersection between performance, between gaming, between TV and film, and all of the potential that comes from the exploration of that kind of transmedia approach. Where do you think it's going to be going in the next sort of 3, 5, 10 years?
Oh, it's a good question. I think that in the short term for this type of technology, that it's not going to be seen, and it should not be seen as something that is to replace existing pipelines. This should be now seen as a normal part of production. It's a normal part of the toolkit. Over the next 3 to 5 years, I think that what we'll see is that this will be much more accessible to smaller productions. It's a sort of natural trickle down of high-end technology facilities down to lower-end productions. What was once the exclusive, you know, privilege of you know, blockbuster movies, will be something that somebody can do on a local scale, particularly with a studio like ourselves. That's part of our remit. But in other ways as well, the technology will become more accessible, easier to use, cheaper to buy, and more efficient to run as well. There's obviously something of a potential saving in energy and carbon if you're not jumping around from location to location. And part of our remit is we're looking at that as well, and hopefully over that period you mentioned, that technologies like this will reduce the sort of the carbon footprint of productions like that and make everything a bit more kind of environmentally sound as a side effect of it.
We're really keen to kind of sort of get more input from the industry as well. This is not a research project that is very industry facing, is what I'm trying to say. So we really need to work with production teams. We had one in last week who came in. They came over from Paris just to use our facility, and they were able to turn around a shoot in half a day, come over from Paris, do the shoot, pack up, get the flight back. You know, it was almost like a 24-hour kind of thing, which is fantastic to see it in that. You know, normally that would take at least 2 or 3 days of setup, and then you'd have post-production of that. They were able to go away with the footage, you know, in the can, which I think is really powerful, you know, bringing those times down to actual on-set times, because, you know, if you were to hire out a facility like this, you know, it's pretty pricey, but that's just stepping foot onto the set. Never mind any of the other associated costs. So hopefully, the part of the remit of CoSTAR is to look at how that is costed. What are the ways that we can make that more efficient, whether that's for the environment or whether that's economically, or whether that's for the performance, like we said earlier. They're all key parts of what the research project will be about. And, you know, we are, again, reaching out to industry. We really need to work with, you know, key players who are out there, from the small, you know, indie production teams right up to the highest end. And we're lucky that CoSTAR is placed within the middle of this, so we will have access to those types of people.
Yeah, I mean, one of the huge advantages that I thought, you know, based on the examples that you showed me earlier, was because of the strength of your multi-location filming, that you can have 2 actors interacting with each other, even though they're miles and miles apart, which is an astonishing thing. And certainly, you know, from an environmental point of view, as much as anything, is a huge advantage, because it saves having to move these 2 people together when they're able to act quite far apart geographically. And I suppose as well, I mean, there's so much said now about virtual actors. We think of, for instance, Peter Cushing being recreated for Rogue One, and certainly in the Marvel movies where people have been de-aged I mean, do you think there's a continued market for those things in the future?
Yeah, and it integrates nicely into what we're hoping we'll be able to achieve in virtual production. So right now, technologies like that are essentially a post-production technique. You have someone that stands in that happens to be the height of beer cushioning and whatnot. But more and more, you're going to see technologies leveraged which allow you to do this almost in real time. I hate to bring up the specter of AI, which can be seen as a very uncomfortable thing. But for applications like that, it's exactly the type of technology that allows people to leverage these kind of techniques for less money and to see the results right away. So if you need to change an actor's performance to get a different result, it's the type of thing that will make that look really tight in the production. And you won't have to wait like, God, we don't know what this is going to look like for 4 months until it gets back from post-production. Things like that, if you need an actor to look slightly younger or whatnot, we'll see that type of stuff trickle down as well. And it's an exciting part of technologies that will start to get integrated into that kind of virtual production, real-time, on-camera loop.
I think it's important to say that we're not talking about replacing actors. We're working with more actors than we ever have done actually in the processes here. It's just given the directors a bit more flexibility in what they can do on the set. So we're looking at it being a much more agile environment, working with the actors, to get the best possible performance. We do want actors to come along with us as well and see the potential of this. I think, there are obviously some people who see it as a threat, and the AI kind of spectre, as Matt called it, a lot of that is misreported, I would say, and there's a lot of assumptions made on what it can do well and what it can't do well. And we're very much looking at the moment anyway, we're certainly looking more at the procedural side of AI and machine learning rather than the generative side of things. We're not really wanting to replace that art direction and that kind of human elements in the pipeline. Far from it. What we want to do is enhance that. So it all comes from, I would say a kind of traditional background, but then applying the technology and the tools to enable just bigger and better productions for less cost and less environmental footprint.
Yeah, because I mean, you mentioned actors, but I mean also other modes of production like dancers and other aspects of live production. I mean, this must be enormously exciting for them. You must have had really positive feedback from directors and performers alike.
Yeah, again, like I said, we're lucky. We have been running a smaller project in-house at Abertay for the last couple of years. So myself and Matt have been working with a lot of performers over the last 2.5 years, getting them into the smaller space, getting them used to working with our mocap setup, working in front of the screen. We've done a couple of short music videos and fashion shoots and mocap for video games. Like I said, we really have. For me personally, it's the most I've worked with real performers, and I was an animator in the industry, so I did a lot of the acting of my work myself, which is hugely problematic, I would say. So working with people who've been trained, whether they're new people in the industry or whether they're experienced people in the industry, I think the potential of this is huge. And I have to say that, we worked with Scottish Dance Theatre, who are based at the Rep. They were fantastic to work with. They really got the technology quite quickly. It didn't get in the way of the performance. We captured them all with our Vicon motion capture system kind of separately and then put it all together later on as a whole piece of work. And, again, it gives you a different output, which, I think is incredibly important to the industry, actually, to say, oh, we can actually do this kind of work as well.
Well, one final question for both of you. It would be remiss of me not to ask, when the project has virtually endless possibilities of how it can be applied to all kinds of productions, what are your own ambitions for the projects in the year ahead? What do you really hope that you see come out of it?
I think for the next year, I mean, for me personally, I would like to, for a year from now, you speak to me and I'll be able to say to you, wow, it was really great to get that production in there. that there was something happening. Either a production has come into the studio to use it exclusively, or there's been filming in the area of live action shooting, and we've supported that in some way, because I think that's sort of our next step in cementing us as a kind of a functioning studio, but also starting that building up of production interest in the area. And something I'll probably like feed into here, Phil, is that like to get something in here, but also to try and foster up related startups.
Yeah, that's something that I think is held us back in the area slightly. We've got a brilliant games hub here in Dundee. What we don't have is a film and TV hub, and I'd argue we don't really have much in the whole of Scotland, actually. You know, you've got the big players like BBC, STV, and they have their studios in Pacific Quay. And there's some associated, post-production houses in Glasgow and Edinburgh as well. But what we want to do is grow that kind of the kind of talent pool businesses around the infrastructure, which is the studio, so that we have the support almost on site. So if we need post-production, we could go next door and there's someone running a small post-production house. If we need to do some VFX work, there's some VFX studios built around a hub, a bit like you have in Soho, where you have a kind of network of high-end, visual effects companies who will all pitch in on a big project. And then that really grows the whole sector. Then we have a kind of ecosystem where people can jump from job to job. But at the moment, they have to go to London or they have to go overseas to kind of live and work in this world. And what we want to do is retain the talent, which, again, it actually comes back to what we're doing at Abertay, which is the first kind of MSc of its time, a master's program here of its type at Abertay, because we're mostly known for games. But the course that me and Matt run is basically a master's in technical art and visual effects, which cuts across games, but also film, TV, animation, live action, and all the kind of performance work that we were talking about earlier on. And we're really excited by this course, which we're only about halfway through the first year of it, the first ever year. But just after term one, we found that the quality of the work that the students produced, because they had access to these tools and facilities and the teaching and the expertise, is really, really high end and really exceeded even my expectations of what a course like this could provide, certainly in year one. So we're really excited about that, and we're hoping that these people will either go out into the industry, into this high-end industry, or they might start their own little businesses, spin out companies. There's already kind of partnerships within the cohort that might lead to small post-production houses, VFX studios, or whatever that is. That's the exciting thing. That's where you grow the skill set and the infrastructure, and then you build on top of that. Then we have a bigger facility. Then we've got a kind of self-contained environment where you can have a one-stop shop for any production teams that come to the city. That's kind of the dream, but we're pretty far down the line of that already, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, if the listeners at home would like to find out more about the CoSTAR Realtime Lab and the new developments, what's the best way for them to do that? Is there a social media channel?
Yeah, I mean, for CoSTAR, probably the best place is the CoSTAR Network website, and also the CoSTAR Network Instagram and LinkedIn pages, which are frequently updated with opportunities, funding opportunities, calls that the project will put out, and that goes across the whole network as well. So you'll get the information for the other studios as well, which is great. And obviously for our course, if you go onto Abertay's website and just search for the MSc in Technical Art and Visual Effects, and you'll get the website which explains how our course operates as well. They're probably the main places.
Right now, that's the best way to get information or contact details for sure. Currently, people are not having problems finding out the details, because I'm constantly getting inquiries. I don't know how they find it, because we've not kind of put the studio out there yet. We've not kind of advertised it. There's no official landing page for it, but they're still finding out somehow. So clearly there's something somewhere that is giving them the correct information. So should be no problem.
And just a final point on that, we are over the summer, and depending on when this podcast goes out, but we are having these kind of open day events for industry. where we're kind of targeting different sectors to kind of showcase the facility and what the possibilities are. So if you keep an eye on the networks which I've described, we'll be putting a call out, or if anyone wants to get in touch with us, again, you could email us at Abertay. I'm p.vaughan@abertay.ac.uk.
Yeah, it's also this kind of open studio day that we're planning. Dates to be confirmed, and that's looking like July now. But we'll put invitations out ahead of time, and anybody that is location manager in production, looking at facilities to do a project or a shoot of any sort, it'll be invaluable to come to the open day and see some practical applications of virtual production to some sort of set pieces that we've come up with to demonstrate all the facilities.
Well, Phil and Matt, thank you so much for having joined us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak with you both. And thank you so much for explaining more about the CoSTAR Realtime Lab, but also the fantastic opportunities that are available at Abertay University for further study in a whole variety of different subjects. So it's been a great pleasure to speak with you both.
Absolute pleasure.
Yeah, no problem. Always happy to participate whenever you need us.
So thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope that you'll join us again soon.